Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Beauty Out of Mire, which is a story of Raziela Miracle's life. She is 11 years old and living with cerebral palsy and autism spectrum disorder. My name is Fidel Adabaraza, and I'm Raziela Miracle's mother and her mouthpiece, and I'm here to narrate to you how Raziela is defying every odd that is presented to her by these two conditions. Please subscribe on this channel and keep in tune with our weekly episodes. Today, I'm going to tell you about Raziela Miracle's twin sister, Leah Blessing, and I fondly refer to her as the child in my heart. Leah was born 2 minutes before Raziela was born, and though born prematurely just like Raziela, Leah exhibited energy and an aggressive character while in the incubator. A few days later, a mama was detected in her heart by the doctor who called in a cardiologist. Now, the cardiologist confirmed that there was a PDA mama in Leah's heart, and treatment for the same was commenced, and after 3 days, the PDA mama could not be detected, and I was so overjoyed as their mother. I praised the Lord. However, a kidney condition arose, and this needed more liquid to be introduced into Leah's delicate system to help the kidneys function as they should. And so when this was done, the heart condition recurred, and it was discovered that when fluids were increased, the heart was strained, and when reduced, the kidneys were strained. So the doctor sought a delicate balance to treat both conditions at the same time, and that was achieved, and the girl started stabilizing. And as her mother, I was allowed to just go into the ICU, into that room, and be able to kangaroo a little Leah, even as I also kangarooed little Raziela. And so I will go and place Leah on my chest inside my clothes for skin to skin contact. That is what we call kangaroo. And she was so tiny. She was beautiful, little girl, tiny, and she will actually fit in between my breasts as I placed her on my chest for those bonding sessions. I enjoyed every minute of it. Every kangaroo session was a prayer time for me and the little girl. I would place Leah on my chest, and I would start singing for her and eventually pray for her, declaring the goodness and blessings of God over her life. I would also do that for her while she was in the incubator. Now, on 11th of April 2011, I went to the hospital as usual to check on the babies, and on arrival, I noticed that Leah looked very pale. She had swollen up and was very dull. I immediately alerted the nurse on duty and also alerted the doctor via phone text, because the doctor was a consultant doctor, and so she was not in the hospital at that particular time. And so the doctor later on responded by coming. She didn't respond to my phone text, but later on she came to hospital. And so I met up with her as she came to check on the babies. And on examination, she said that the girl was anemic and had edema. And so she prescribed blood transfusion for her, unless it is a drug to help flush out excessive fluid from her system. Now that was about 10 p.m. The doctor left me behind as I lingered there for a little bit more time, because that had become my routine. I would wake up early every morning about 6 a.m. and make my way to the hospital, and would stay there till evening, about 10:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. before going home. Because as a mother, what do? You have just delivered. It's your first time delivery. These are your firstborn babies, and they are preterm babies, and they have medical conditions. They are confined in hospital, in incubators. You're not sure about their lives. What do you do at home? How do you go about it? Though I had gone through cesarean section and I was not healed, I opted to always go and just be with my children at the hospital. So that day, as usual, I had stayed the entire day at the hospital, and so I stayed in hospital. So I left that evening for home at around 11 p.m. and Leah was to be transfused that night. Now, in the course of time, I have come to realize that before a transfusion is done to somebody who is severely anemic, there is some sense that needs to go on. I have come to understand that when someone gets severely anemic, the body begins to retain water for the heart to continue functioning well. And this was the case for Leah. So in that case, for a patient like Leah, the medical staff needed to transfuse her and halfway through stop the transfusion and give her the Lasix drug to flush out the excessive water in her system so that her heart is not overloaded again. However, I guess the nurse on duty may not have understood that well, and so she went ahead and gave the poor girl Lasix before transfusion was begun, which flushed out the fluids in her system, and her veins subsequently collapsed and her heart had nothing much to pump. And so later on, as the transfusion was done, little Leah went, the transfusion was needed to be done. Little Leah did not have veins much to show. So when the doctors came to start searching for the veins to transfuse her, they could not find them. As I came to be told later on, the better part of the night was spent by the doctors on duty at the hospital at the neonatal unit searching for the veins on Leah. Now, to add insult to the injury, when Leah needed to be fed, because she was feeding via tubes, so both her and her sister, they were feeding via tubes, and so the tubes would be inserted into their stomachs. And in that case, a nurse on duty needed to always check out whether the tube was rightly fixed in the stomach or whether it had deviated and gone the wrong route, so such as, into the lungs, or so, before feeding a baby. And so this time round, the nurse on duty forgot probably to check on that, and unfortunately for little Leah, the tube had actually gone to her lungs, and I want to think that probably that happened as she struggled with the pain when the doctors kept pricking her in search of the veins. So when the nurse started feeding her, unknown to her, she poured the milk content into the baby's lungs. And this is milk, EBM, extracted breast milk. I had extracted milk myself, left at the hospital for the children to be fed. And so it is this extracted breast milk that I left that was actually poured and went into Leah's lungs. And that was at 3 a.m. on 12th April 2010. And that is when Leah's journey took a downhill turn. Breathing became a problem and she was rushed to the neonatal ICU. She was resuscitated, and that is when the battle to keep her alive began in earnest. Now at about 5 a.m., the hospital was able to get in touch with Leah's consultant doctor, who came, and when she surveyed the situation, she authorized for a specialist doctor to be called from another hospital, and the doctor came and was able to get a vein on Leah's head. But now the more critical condition or situation was the lungs. And so the team had to first stabilize her lungs before proceeding to transfuse her. And at about 5 a.m., the hospital managed to get to me via phone. And this is what they said just from the other end of the call. All I heard was, just pray for the baby. And so, they said that and ended the call immediately. I immediately heard those words and I was so shaken. I was taken aback. I knew all was not well. I began asking myself, what is wrong? What has happened? But she was stable. When I left, I asked all those questions at a go, and yet they already had hung up the phone on the other end. So I was shaking. I was panic stricken. And, all I did was to just say, God, help me. I could not pray. I could not gather myself together to pray. I was shaking. Now, without much ado, I left for the hospital, and in 10 minutes after the call, I was at the hospital because I didn't stay far from the hospital. I found my baby on the resuscitation table. The doctors working hard to stabilize her. My goodness, the sight of it was scary. When I realized that I could not compose myself to pray, I sent a text message to my friends, the people I knew I could count on for prayers. Thank God that I belonged to a church family, people who would pray for me. And they actually did pray for me. I reached out to the people that I knew, and they took their positions and started calling on the Lord for me and for my babies. And people prayed earnestly for baby Leah. Now, 30 minutes later, the medical staff managed to stabilize her. And, she was taken back to the incubator. And this was the second time she was being resuscitated. So the team placed her in the incubator, and her doctor came to update me of the situation. Now, the only thing she told me was, your baby is very sick. I must tell you that she is very sick. When the doctor said that emphatically, I knew that the situation was bad, and I quickly asked her, will she be okay? Is she going to get out of it? And again, the doctor said, the only thing I can tell you for now is that your baby is very sick. Being sick, she is sick. Well, I left that place shaken, and the doctor left for the day as I remained behind at the ICU watching helplessly as my daughter fought for her life. Now, for about 1.5 hours, she seemed stable. Then she started crashing again. And at about 9 a.m., the team was back on the resuscitation table again for the third time that morning. Now, when the doctors managed to stabilize her that time round, they put her onto a respirator, for her lungs were not so stable, to function on their own, accord anymore. So I was allowed at about 12 noon to go see her, and I was happy to see her energy again. And though obviously exhausted and in pain, something interesting happened. Now, when I went close to her incubator, the baby turned and kept looking straight into my eyes and had somewhat a smile on her face. She even yawned. And I was so convinced that the medical team had now gotten it right at this time round. I was so convinced that she was back, to her stable condition. And even though her feet were purple, I didn't think much about it. I was very excited, and I saw her look at me brightly. All I knew was that she was okay, and she was going to be okay. And at that time, the nurses requested me to go and have some rest as well, as I was given a room and a bed to rest, because I had not yet healed. And since it was just 3 weeks after the delivery of the children through a cesarean section, and I had my spiritual parents come in to come and just be with me at that particular time. And so they prayed with me and encouraged me. But about half an hour later, a nurse walked into that room where I was resting and said, "Mom, we want you to come back to the ICU, to the NICU." They called it NICU. She said, "We are back on the resuscitation table again." I didn't know what to say, friends. I quickly walked back with her to the neonatal ICU. And when I walked in, the doctor was seated on his chair watching as the nurses lazily attended to the baby. I looked at the doctor, and his look and the look on the nurses' faces showed me that they had already given up on my baby. But when I looked at the monitoring machines, they indicated that all was well. The oxygen monitor was still showing 89%, concentration of oxygen circulation in her body. And so for a moment, that made me think that she was breathing very well. Then I saw the respiratory monitor drop to 0. And that is when the doctor told me, "Mom, I'm afraid we have to stop now." And so my first question to the doctor was, "Why do you give up on my baby when she's still alive?" And in a desperate state, I asked the doctor, "What else can you do? Please do something." And the doctor asked me rather carelessly and emotionlessly. She didn't have much emotion. He actually displayed no emotion at all. "And who told you she's still alive?" I pointed to the oxygen monitor, explaining to him that the baby was still breathing. And in a rather just, careless voice, the doctor said, "These are just but machines. If you want, we can switch them all off and you will see." And so they went ahead and switched the machines off. And that, I was standing there devastated and not knowing what to do, confused. And the doctor said she does not have a pulse, as he reached out to her arm. And that's when I felt my world crumble. There was pain in my heart, such intense pain that I cannot be able to describe to you even as I narrate. My little baby's heart had given in and she had died at 2:10 p.m. on 12th April 2010, on the 18th day after her birth. And for a moment I cursed the day I was born. I desired to disappear from the face of the earth. I remembered my biological mother, and I wished I would disappear back to her womb. And being a pastor, I had counseled with grieving people many times. But when it happened to me, it seemed a whole new thing. I felt lost. And thank God for my spiritual parents who joined me at the ICU. All I could utter was, "Give me my baby." That is all that kept on coming out of my mouth. I told the nurses, "Give me my baby." A nurse wrapped my baby's body in an old yellow shawl and gave it to me. The body was still warm. I could not believe that my baby was dead. I did not know what to do with the body when she gave it to me. I had stayed in the hospital. I had seen pregnant women walk in and walk out so happy, so cheerful, with babies, that are alive, and people escorting them with flower bouquets and all that. Here I was seated with a baby wrapped in an old shawl and being told that the baby is dead. And so I wanted to leave the hospital with the body and go to an unknown place. I was confused. So I asked the nurse, "Can I live with her now?" But the nurse, looked at me and told me I could not go out of the ICU, even to the corridor with the body. So I sat down and cuddled my baby and sobbed in utter bitterness. I was devastated. My world had shattered. At that time, my spiritual parents, another set of my spiritual parents walked in, and I have never felt as helpless as I felt when this couple walked into the neonatal ICU. And that's when I realized that I needed a father figure around. I needed someone stronger than me, someone who would offer guidance and a solution to what was happening to me, someone who would shed some light on the darkness that was engulfing me and clouding my mind. I needed someone to help me soar above the madness. And that time I needed someone I would talk to and they answer me there and then. And the baby in me wanted answers. The baby in me had arose. I was no better than a 3-year-old in trouble. And thank God for my spiritual dad who promptly stepped in and, through the power of the Holy Spirit, God enabled him to play that father figure for me at that time. And so with the baby's body on my laps, I cried out to, this church elder, my spiritual father, "Dad, what am I supposed to do with this? Dad, what am I supposed to do?" I repeated that over and over and over again. And he quickly realized that I was lost and I needed answers. And so he said, "Do nothing." Just in a firm, gentle voice. He said, "Do nothing." And that was one of the hardest afternoons in my life. I left the hospital together with, in company of these brethren, and went home. And people started coming to my house to comfort me. I had comforted others, but this time I needed to be comforted. I didn't know how to behave when people comforted me. And like Job, I was saying to myself, what I feared most has come upon me. What I dreaded has come to me. What I dreaded has happened to me. It was hard for me. Now I had one baby in the incubator, unwell, fighting for her life, and that is Raziela Miracle. And I had the other one dead, her body lying at the morgue in the same hospital, and that is Leah Blessing. I still went to the hospital early in the mornings to check on Twin 2 and express breast milk for her, and also go on with the plans for burial for Leah Blessing. Leah's body was laid to rest at the Langata Cemetery on 19th of April 2010 after a church service at this church that very day. Well, we'll be right back with the continuation of Beauty Out of Mire, Defying the Odds of Cerebral Palsy and Autism Spectrum Disorder, the life of Raziela Miracle, next week, Friday. Please subscribe on this channel and keep in tune with our weekly episode. Thank you for cheering us on. And as you have read correctly, this has been one of the hardest episodes for me to record. I hope that probably it will be better as we keep on recording and as you keep on cheering us on. God bless you.